The chandeliers of Bellagio Prime hung like frozen waterfalls of crystal, casting golden light across white tablecloths and champagne flutes. The soft melody of a grand piano drifted through the air, mixing with the clink of silverware and the murmur of polished conversation. It was the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer cost more than most people's weekly groceries. The kind of place where designer handbags rested on velvet chairs like sleeping pets, and where judgment lived in every sideways glance. The door opened. She stepped inside, and every head in the room turned. Clara Bennett stood frozen in the doorway, clutching a second-hand purse against her chest like a shield. Her white blouse was clean, but worn at the sleeves. Her navy skirt was simple, practical. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, not a single curl styled, not a trace of makeup on her pale face. She looked like she had wandered in from a different world, because she had. From a corner table draped in silk, 3 women in designer dresses leaned toward each other. Their diamonds caught the light as they whispered behind manicured hands. Who let her in? She must be lost. Probably a waitress, or someone's nanny. Laughter, sharp and cruel, hidden behind crystal wine glasses. Clara heard every word. Her cheeks flushed pink, but she lifted her chin and walked toward the maitre d's desk. She had promised Sophie she would try. Just this once. One blind date. One chance to remember that she was more than the ghost of who she used to be. But she didn't know that in exactly 4 minutes, a 7-year-old girl would run through this restaurant, climb into the chair beside her, and scream a single word that would change everything. Mommy. 3 hours earlier, Clara's apartment in Brooklyn was small. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing about whose turn it was to buy milk. The radiator clanked like a dying robot every winter night. The bathroom sink dripped a rhythm she had learned to sleep through, but it was hers. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the simple dress Sophie had laid out for her. "You're going," Sophie said, arms crossed, blocking the door like a prison guard. Her red hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes held that stubborn look Clara knew too well. "I already confirmed the reservation. You're meeting him at 7. I didn't ask for this." "I know. That's why I did it for you." Sophie's voice softened. "Clara, it's been 4 years. 4 years of hiding. 4 years of punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault." Clara looked at her roommate, her best friend, the only person who had stood by her when everything fell apart. 4 years. It felt like a lifetime. She closed her eyes, and the memories came rushing back like a flood she couldn't stop. Columbia University. The master's program in child psychology. Professor Whitman calling her thesis on childhood trauma the most groundbreaking work I've seen in 20 years. She had been 6 months away from graduation, 6 months away from becoming Dr. Clara Bennett. The internship at Mount Sinai Children's Hospital, where she had worked with kids who had been through unspeakable trauma. The little girl named Maisie, who had finally smiled after 3 months of careful, patient therapy. The letter from the department chair, offering her a faculty position before she had even defended her dissertation. Clara had been so close to everything she ever wanted. And then Victoria Ashford happened. Victoria, 34 years old, the daughter of a wealthy pharmaceutical executive and major university donor. Victoria, who had coasted through the same program on her father's checkbook while Clara worked double shifts as a waitress to pay tuition. Victoria, who had watched Clara receive praise after praise while she faded into the background like expensive wallpaper. The accusation came out of nowhere. Inappropriate conduct with a minor patient. Psychological manipulation. Emotional abuse. It was a lie, every single word. But Victoria's family had money. Clara's family had nothing. No lawyer, no defense, no chance. She was expelled 3 weeks before graduation. Blacklisted from every hospital and clinic in New York. Forbidden from ever practicing psychology again. 4 years later, she was a nanny. A good one, but still, a nanny. And tonight, she was going on a blind date she never asked for. Sophie sat beside her on the bed. "I know you're scared," she said quietly. "But you deserve to be happy, Clara. You deserve a second chance." Clara managed a small smile. "One date. That's it. That's all I ask. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooks Central Park, Ethan Mercer stood in front of his closet, staring at a row of identical charcoal suits. He was 35 years old, CEO of Mercer Tech, one of the most innovative technology companies on the East Coast. Magazines called him a genius. Investors called him a gold mine. Fortune 500 called him one of the most eligible bachelors in America. His daughter called him Daddy, and since the accident, she had called no one else anything at all. "You're really going through with this?" Ethan turned. His father, Harold Mercer, stood in the doorway. At 68, Harold still had the sharp eyes of the man who had built Mercer Tech from nothing in a garage in New Jersey. His hair was silver now, his steps slower, but his mind remained a blade that never dulled. "You're the one who set this up," Ethan said flatly. "Because you need to live again, son." "I am living." "No, you're surviving. There's a difference." Ethan said nothing. He reached for a tie, a dark blue one that Rebecca had given him on their last anniversary. He could still remember her laugh when she handed him the box. Still remember her kiss when he put it on. Rebecca. She had kissed him goodbye on a Tuesday morning, promised to pick up Lily from ballet class, and driven into an intersection where a delivery truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. She never came home, and something in Lily broke that day. The child who had once talked to everyone, who had laughed at everything, who had sung songs in the bathtub and made up elaborate stories about fairies and dragons, that child disappeared. In her place was a silent little girl who wore only pink, because pink was Mommy's favorite color, and who trusted no one except her father and grandfather. Ethan had hired 12 nannies since the accident. Therapists, child psychologists, specialists from every prestigious institution in the country. None of them could reach her. "Lily needs a mother," Harold said quietly. "Not another specialist with a clipboard. A mother. No one can replace Rebecca. I'm not asking anyone to replace her. I'm asking someone to stand beside you, to help carry what you've been carrying alone." Harold paused. "There's a difference." Ethan turned to face his father, and for a moment, his mask slipped. Behind the CEO, behind the businessman, there was just a tired man who missed his wife. "One date," Harold said. "That's all I ask." From down the hallway, a small voice called out, "Daddy?" Lily stood in the doorway of her bedroom, wearing a pink dress with white ribbons in her dark hair. At 7 years old, she was small for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She was holding a book, as always. This week, it was Charlotte's Web. Last week, it had been The Secret Garden. She read books meant for children twice her age, because books didn't ask questions. Books didn't expect answers. Books never left. "I'll be back before bedtime," Ethan said, kneeling in front of her and adjusting one of her ribbons. "Mrs. Patterson will stay with you." Lily nodded. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken to anyone except her father and grandfather since the day they buried her mother. Ethan kissed her forehead and walked out the door. He didn't see Lily watching him from the window. He didn't see the determined look in her eyes. 7:15. Bellagio Prime. Clara sat at the table by the window, her hands folded in her lap, trying to make herself invisible. It wasn't working. From across the room, Victoria Ashford froze mid-sip of her champagne. She recognized that face instantly. That blonde hair. That quiet, unassuming presence that had once made her feel so inadequate, so inferior, so consumed with jealousy that she had destroyed a woman's entire future without a single regret. Clara Bennett, the girl she had buried 4 years ago. A slow smile spread across Victoria's perfectly painted lips. Well, she murmured to her friends Madison and Brooke. "Look who wandered into the wrong neighborhood." She raised her voice, just loud enough to carry across the quiet restaurant. "Isn't that the psychology student who got expelled for traumatizing children? I heard she made a little girl cry so hard she needed months of therapy afterward. Some people simply aren't meant to work with the vulnerable, don't you think?" Clara's hands tightened in her lap until her knuckles went white. She heard. She always heard. But she had learned to survive by staying silent, by making herself small, by swallowing the injustice until it became part of her bones. What she didn't know was that Victoria was here for a reason tonight. That Victoria had spent the last 6 months strategically positioning herself as the perfect match for Ethan Mercer. That Victoria's father wanted to merge his pharmaceutical empire with Mercer Tech, and a marriage would seal the deal. And now, the one woman Victoria thought she had eliminated forever was sitting in the same restaurant, waiting for the same man. 7:22. Back at the penthouse, Mrs. Patterson had stepped into the hallway to take a phone call from her daughter. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Lily moved quickly. She had done this before, slipping out when the adults weren't watching. The first time, she had made it all the way to the park before the doorman caught her. The second time, she had reached the coffee shop on the corner where Mommy used to buy hot chocolate. Tonight, she made it all the way to the elevator. The doorman, Thomas, saw her in the lobby. "Miss Lily, where are you going?" "To find Daddy," she said. It was one of the few sentences she spoke to anyone outside her family. "He's at the fancy restaurant." Thomas hesitated. He should call Mr. Mercer. He should stop her. But Lily looked at him with those dark eyes, so much like her mother's, and he found himself giving her directions instead. "It's 3 blocks east, sweetheart. The one with the red awning." She nodded solemnly and walked out into the Manhattan evening. Thomas picked up the phone to call Mr. Mercer, but the line was busy. By the time he tried again, Lily was already gone. The side door of the restaurant opened. A small figure in a pink dress slipped through, unnoticed by the busy staff preparing for the evening rush. Lily wasn't looking for her father. She was looking for someone else. For 3 weeks, she had seen her at Camden Park. A woman with golden hair, sitting on a bench near the duck pond, watching the children play. The woman never approached, never spoke, but she had smiled at Lily once, a smile so warm and gentle and sad that it made Lily's chest hurt in a way she couldn't explain. She looked like the photographs of Mommy that Daddy kept on his dresser. She felt like the dreams where Mommy came back and held her and promised never to leave again. And now, that same woman was sitting alone at a table by the window, looking lost and scared and beautiful. Lily didn't hesitate. She ran. Across the marble floor, past the startled waiters, through the maze of tables and champagne glasses and shocked faces. She climbed into the chair beside Clara, threw her thin arms around her neck, and said the words she had been saving for 1,000 lonely nights. "Mommy, Mommy, I found you." The entire restaurant went silent. A fork clattered to the floor. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble. And from the entrance, Ethan Mercer stood frozen, staring at his daughter, the daughter who hadn't spoken to a stranger in years, clinging to a woman he had never seen before, crying a word she hadn't spoken since the day her mother died. Ethan crossed the restaurant in 5 long strides. His heart was pounding against his ribs. His mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. His daughter, his silent, shattered daughter, was wrapped around a complete stranger, sobbing into her shoulder like she had found something she had lost forever. "What did you do to her?" His voice was ice and steel. Clara looked up, her blue eyes wide with shock and confusion. "I didn't do anything. I swear. I've never even spoken to her before tonight." "Liar." Victoria was there suddenly, inserting herself between them like a viper sensing wounded prey. Her perfume was suffocating. Her smile was poison. "Ethan, darling, I know this woman. She was expelled from Columbia for abusing children. She's a predator. She probably planned this whole thing to get close to you and your money." Clara's face went white as snow. She knew that voice. She would know it anywhere, in any crowd, in any nightmare. The voice that had destroyed her life. "No," Lily cried, gripping Clara's neck tighter. "No, Daddy, stop. This is Mommy. I know it's her." Ethan reached for his daughter, but Lily clung to Clara like she was drowning, and Clara was the only solid thing in a dark and endless ocean. "Sweetheart, listen to me. This isn't Mommy. Mommy is gone. Mommy is in heaven. She came back." Lily's voice was fierce through her tears. "Mommy told me in my dreams, Daddy. She said someone would come. Someone with hair like sunshine. Someone who would take care of us and make you smile again." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow to the chest. He stared at his daughter, at the tears streaming down her small face, at the desperate, burning hope in her dark eyes. And then he looked at Clara. Blonde hair, golden in the chandelier light. Gentle eyes, filled with confusion and fear and something else. Something soft, hands that trembled but still held his daughter with infinite, instinctive care. "Everyone, please, let's not make a spectacle." A new voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. Harold Mercer walked through the crowd, and people parted for him the way they always did. His presence commanded instant respect, instant silence. He looked at Victoria with eyes that had seen through 1,000 business deals and 1,000 liars. Then he looked at Clara. "Young lady," he said quietly, "would you mind if we spoke somewhere more private? I'd like to understand what's happening here." Clara swallowed hard. "Of course." Harold gestured to a quiet alcove near the back of the restaurant. Ethan followed, still reaching for Lily, who absolutely refused to let go of Clara's hand. They sat in a private booth, away from the staring eyes and whispered gossip. Harold studied Clara for a long, uncomfortable moment. His gaze was sharp but not unkind. "You work with children," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, I'm a nanny now." "But you weren't always." Clara hesitated. "No, you studied psychology, child psychology, specifically, at Columbia University. You were in the master's program, 6 months from graduation, when something happened." Her breath caught. "How did you know that?" "I've been in business for 40 years, my dear. I can spot a trained mind in 30 seconds. The way you're holding my granddaughter, the way you positioned your body to comfort her without restricting her. That's not instinct. That's education." He leaned forward. "What happened to you?" Clara looked down at her hands, still intertwined with Lily's small fingers. "I was accused of something I didn't do. I couldn't afford to fight it. So I lost everything. My degree, my career, my future." "Who accused you?" Clara's eyes flickered toward the dining room, where Victoria stood watching them through the glass partition, her face a mask of barely concealed fury. Harold followed her gaze. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something cold and calculating. "I see." He turned to his son. "Ethan, I believe this young woman is telling the truth. She's not a threat to Lily. She's not a con artist or a predator." He placed a weathered hand on Clara's shoulder. "In fact, unless I'm very much mistaken, she might be exactly what this family needs." They returned to the table. Lily refused to sit anywhere except next to Clara. She held Clara's hand through the entire meal, chattering in a way she hadn't chattered since her mother was alive. "Do you like pink?" "I like pink because it was Mommy's favorite color." "Do you like books?" "I'm reading Charlotte's Web right now. It's really sad when Charlotte dies, but also really beautiful because she saved Wilbur." "Do you like pancakes?" "Daddy makes pancakes on Sunday mornings, but he always burns the edges." Clara listened to every word like it was precious. She answered every question with patience and warmth. And something in her chest, something that had been frozen solid for 4 long years, began to thaw. Ethan watched them in stunned silence. He had spent a fortune on therapists, specialists, every expert who promised to unlock the door to his daughter's wounded heart. And here was a woman in a second-hand blouse, doing in 1 hour what no one else had accomplished since the accident. From across the restaurant, Victoria's voice rang out like a bell designed to shatter glass. "Ethan, darling, surely you're not planning to let your daughter become attached to a disgraced former student? Think of your reputation. Think of the company. Think of what people will say." Ethan stood slowly. For years, he had buried his emotions beneath layers of ice and professionalism. He had controlled every reaction, measured every word, built walls so high that no one could see the broken man inside. But now, watching his daughter smile for the first time since her mother's funeral, something inside him cracked wide open. "Victoria," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent restaurant, "this woman has done more for my daughter in 1 hour than you have done in 6 months of trying to insert yourself into our lives. If that makes her unworthy in your eyes, then your eyes are worthless to me." Victoria's face turned the color of raw meat. She grabbed her designer clutch and stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. But before she disappeared through the door, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "Find me everything on Clara Bennett," she hissed to whoever answered. "Every secret, every weakness, every photograph." Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "I destroyed her once. I'll destroy her again, 1 week later, Harold Mercer sat in his mahogany-paneled study, reading a file that his private investigator had delivered that morning. Clara Bennett, age 27, former psychology graduate student at Columbia University, top of her class, glowing recommendations from every professor, a thesis on childhood trauma that one reviewer had called revolutionary. And then, 4 years ago, a single accusation, filed by Victoria Ashford. Harold read the details with growing disgust. The accusation was deliberately vague. The evidence was manufactured. The investigation was rushed and one-sided. And the outcome was predetermined the moment Victoria's father wrote a 7-figure check to the university's development fund. "My God," Harold whispered. He picked up the phone and called his son. That evening, Ethan sat across from his father in the penthouse study. The damning file spread between them on the antique desk. "She was framed," Harold said flatly. "Victoria Ashford destroyed this woman's entire career because she was jealous. Because Clara was everything Victoria wanted to be and knew she never could become." Ethan stared at the papers, at the glowing evaluations, at the photograph of a younger Clara, smiling beside a group of children at Mount Sinai Hospital, her face bright with hope and purpose. Why didn't she fight back? She couldn't afford to. Her mother was a school teacher who died of cancer when Clara was 19. Her father was a construction worker who passed away 2 years later. She had no family money, no connections, no one to stand up for her. Harold's voice hardened. Victoria's family has all of those things. The deck was stacked before the game even started. Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about Clara, about the way she had held his daughter like she was made of glass and gold, about the kindness in her voice when she answered Lily's endless questions, about the profound sadness in her eyes that she tried so hard to hide. "What do we do?" Harold smiled the smile of a man who had been fighting unfair fights his entire life. "We do what Mercers have always done, son. We find the truth. We gather the evidence. And we fight for what's right." 3 weeks later, Clara had become a regular visitor at the Mercer penthouse. At first, she came only to see Lily, to read her stories about brave pigs and loyal spiders, to help her with drawings of butterflies and castles, and sometimes, carefully, tentatively, pictures of a woman with dark hair and a kind smile. But slowly, imperceptibly, she became something more. She used every technique she had learned in graduate school, the education that had been stolen from her but never erased from her mind. She helped Lily draw pictures of her mother, not to forget, but to remember, not to replace, but to honor. She taught Lily that loving someone new didn't mean betraying someone gone. She showed her that grief wasn't a prison you stayed trapped in forever. It was a room with a door, and someday, when you were ready, you could choose to open it. And Lily blossomed. She started speaking to the doorman Thomas, thanking him for helping her find Daddy that night. She made a friend at school named Emma who also liked books about animals. She laughed, really laughed, her whole body shaking with joy. For the first time since the accident, Ethan watched it all happen with wonder. And somewhere along the way, he stopped watching Clara as a miracle for his daughter. He started watching her as something else entirely. Central Park. A Sunday afternoon, the three of them walked together beneath the golden canopy of autumn trees. Lily ran ahead, chasing butterflies through patches of amber sunlight, her pink dress bright against the carpet of fallen leaves. Clara walked beside Ethan, their shoulders almost touching, their steps perfectly matched. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For bringing her back to me. For 3 years, I watched my daughter disappear a little more every day. I tried everything, spent everything, and nothing worked." He paused. "Then you walked into that restaurant, and everything changed." Clara looked at him, at the grief that still lived behind his eyes, at the strength that held it all together. "She was never truly gone, Ethan. She was just waiting for someone who understood." Ahead, Lily squealed with pure delight as a monarch butterfly landed on her outstretched finger. And then, without warning, everything went wrong. A dog broke free from its leash. A German shepherd, large and panicked, barking wildly as it charged across the grass toward the running children. Lily screamed and bolted, straight toward the jogging path, straight toward the street beyond, straight toward the sound of an approaching taxi. Lily! Ethan was already moving, sprinting faster than he had ever run in his life. His expensive shoes pounded the grass. His lungs burned. His heart exploded against his ribs. He reached her just as her small foot touched the curb. He grabbed her tiny body, twisted his own to shield her, and threw them both onto the soft grass as the taxi screeched past, horn blaring, missing them by inches. For a moment, there was only silence and the sound of his own ragged breathing. Then Clara was there, falling to her knees beside them, pulling Lily into her arms with shaking hands. "Are you okay? Baby, are you hurt anywhere?" Lily clung to her, sobbing with fear and relief. Ethan lay on the grass, his arms scraped and bleeding, his suit ruined, his heart still racing. He looked up at Clara, holding his daughter exactly the way Rebecca used to hold her, tears streaming down her face, whispering words of comfort. And the words came out before he could stop them. "She's safe now, because her mother is here." Clara froze. Ethan realized what he had said. Their eyes met, and the whole world went quiet. And Lily, still trembling, whispered through her tears, "Daddy, I know Mommy in heaven sent Clara to us. Mommy wants you to be happy again. I can feel it in my heart." Victoria Ashford did not accept defeat. She had spent 6 months building her path to Ethan Mercer. 6 months of charity, galas, and strategic dinners, and carefully placed stories in society columns. 6 months of whispering in the right ears, wearing the right dresses, saying the right things. And now some nobody from Brooklyn was ruining everything. The article appeared on a Monday morning, splashed across every gossip website and social media platform in New York. Mercer Tech CEO romances disgraced psychology student. Former Columbia University student expelled for child abuse now dating billionaire single father. By noon, Mercer Tech stock had dropped 4%. By evening, the board of directors had called an emergency meeting. By midnight, Ethan's phone was ringing off the hook with calls from concerned investors. Victoria sat in her Upper East Side apartment, sipping Dom Perignon, watching the chaos unfold on her massive television screen. "Checkmate," she whispered and smiled. Clara saw the article at 6 in the morning. She read every word, every lie, every twisted half-truth that painted her as a monster, a manipulator, a predator who had targeted a grieving widower and his vulnerable child. The comments were worse. She should be in prison. That poor little girl. Gold digger alert. By 7, she had made her decision. She wrote a letter with trembling hands. She packed her small bag, and she went to say goodbye. Lily was eating breakfast when Clara arrived. The little girl looked up from her cereal, saw Clara in the doorway, and her whole face lit up like sunrise. "Clara, Daddy said you might come today. Can we go to the park later? Can we feed the ducks? I saved some bread from dinner last night." Clara knelt down in front of her. She memorized every detail of that small, precious face. The dark eyes that sparkled with life again. The stubborn chin. The smile that had taken so long to return. "Sweetheart, I have to tell you something." "What?" "I have to go away for a while." Lily's smile vanished like a candle blown out by wind. "Go away? Where? When are you coming back?" Clara's voice broke. "I don't know if I can come back, baby." "But why?" Lily's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. "Did I do something wrong? I'll be good, I promise. I'll eat all my vegetables. I won't ask for so many stories at bedtime. I'll do anything." "No, no, no." Clara pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect. You're absolutely perfect. Then why are you leaving me?" Clara looked up. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. "Clara, don't do this." "I have to." She stood, keeping Lily close. "The article, the stock, your company, everything you've built. I'm destroying it all just by being here. Victoria won't stop. She'll keep attacking you, keep attacking Lily, until there's nothing left. I don't care about the stock. Your board does. Your investors do. Your employees do. Thousands of people depend on Mercer Tech for their livelihoods, Ethan. I don't care, but I do." Clara's voice cracked like thin ice. I love her too much to watch her be hurt because of me. I love you too much to watch you lose everything your family built." Ethan stepped forward. "Clara, please." But she was already walking toward the door. "Mommy, no." Lily broke free and ran after her, grabbing her hand with desperate strength. "Mommy, you promised. You promised you wouldn't leave me. You promised." Clara knelt one last time. She pressed her lips to Lily's forehead, letting her tears fall into the girl's dark hair. "Sometimes," she whispered, "promises are broken out of love." Then she stood, pulled her hand free, and walked out into the gray morning rain. That night, Lily refused to eat her dinner. She refused to speak. She sat in the corner of her room, clutching a photograph of Clara that Ethan hadn't known she'd taken, staring at nothing with empty eyes. By midnight, she was burning with fever. By dawn, she was in the emergency room at Mount Sinai. "Severe dehydration," the doctor said quietly, his voice heavy with concern, "combined with acute emotional trauma. Her body is shutting down because her heart can't process another loss." Ethan sat beside her bed, holding her small hand in both of his, watching the machines beep and the IV drip. His daughter, his whole world, dying of a broken heart. "Clara," he whispered into the silence of the hospital room, "please, please come back to us." 3 days later, Harold Mercer was not a man who accepted defeat. While his granddaughter lay in a hospital bed and his son sat vigil beside her, Harold had been working, making calls, gathering evidence, calling in favors from judges and journalists and old friends in very high places. Victoria Ashford had made a fatal mistake. She had assumed that wealth and connections made her untouchable. She had never faced a Mercer who was angry. The press conference was held in the grand lobby of Mercer Tech headquarters. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones bristled like a forest of silver trees. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Harold stepped to the polished wooden podium. 4 years ago, he said, his voice steady and clear, a young woman named Clara Bennett was accused of a crime she did not commit. She was 6 months away from earning her master's degree in child psychology. She had a perfect record, glowing recommendations, and a bright future ahead of her. He paused, letting the cameras capture his face. The accusation was filed by Victoria Ashford. The evidence was fabricated. The investigation was bought and paid for by the Ashford family's donations to Columbia University. The room exploded with noise. Harold raised his hand, and silence fell. "I have here sworn testimony from 3 witnesses who observed Victoria Ashford forging documents in her campus office. I have bank records showing payments from the Ashford Family Foundation to university administrators within days of the accusation being filed. And I have a full, notarized confession from a former Ashford employee who was directly ordered to destroy Clara Bennett's career." He looked directly into the nearest camera. "Clara Bennett is innocent. She has always been innocent. And Victoria Ashford will face the full legal consequences of her crimes." On cue, the lobby doors opened. 2 police officers walked in, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Victoria Ashford, caught trying to board a private plane to Switzerland, was escorted past the cameras in silver handcuffs. "This is a mistake," she screamed, her perfect composure shattered. "Do you know who my father is? Do you know who you're dealing with?" "Yes," Harold said calmly, stepping away from the podium. "I know exactly who you are. A liar, a fraud, a coward who destroys others because she cannot build anything herself." The cameras captured everything. Clara saw the press conference on the small television in Sophie's apartment. Sophie sat beside her on the worn couch, gripping her hand so tight it hurt, tears streaming down her freckled face. "Clara, 4 years. 4 years I watched you suffer for something you didn't do. I watched you cry yourself to sleep. I watched you give up on your dreams. And now the whole world knows the truth." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. Her name, cleared, on national television, by the man she had learned to call family. Sophie stood up abruptly. She grabbed Clara's coat from the hook by the door and threw it at her. "What are you waiting for? That little girl is in the hospital. That man is waiting for you. Go." Clara caught the coat with numb fingers. "Sophie, I don't know if I can." "You can. You've always been strong enough, Clara. Stronger than anyone I've ever known." Sophie's voice cracked. Now run. Clara ran. Through the rain-slick streets of Manhattan, past the yellow taxis and the umbrellas and the indifferent crowds, all the way to Mount Sinai Hospital. She burst through the emergency room doors, found the children's ward, found the room number the nurse gave her with sympathetic eyes. She threw open the door. Lily lay in the hospital bed, small and pale against the white sheets. Machines beeped. An IV snaked into her thin arm. Ethan sat beside her, his head bowed, his hand wrapped around hers, his face aged by 3 days of sleepless terror. Clara? His voice was a broken whisper. She fell to her knees beside the bed. Lily. Lily, baby, I'm here. Mommy's here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Lily's eyes fluttered open. Mommy? Yes, baby, I'm here. I'm not leaving again. Not ever, I promise. Lily reached up with trembling arms, and Clara gathered her close, crying into her dark hair, holding her like she would never let go. Ethan watched them, his own eyes red and burning. He knelt beside Clara, his hand finding hers. I don't care about the money, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't care about the company. I don't care what anyone thinks or says or writes. He squeezed her fingers. I only care about this, about us, about being a family. Clara looked at him through her tears. I was so scared. I thought I was protecting you. I know, but we don't need protection from each other. We need each other. He touched her face gently. Stay, please. Let us be a family. Lily's small voice interrupted them. Daddy, is Clara going to be my mommy now? For real and forever? Ethan looked at Clara. Clara looked at Lily. If that's okay with you, Clara whispered. Lily smiled. The first real smile in days. Weak but radiant. Mommy in heaven told me you would come. She said she picked you special. Just for us. Because you have the biggest heart. 1 year later, the wedding was held in the garden of the Mercer estate on Long Island. Fairy lights hung from the ancient oak trees like captured stars. White roses lined the aisle in silver vases. A string quartet played canon in D as the guests took their seats. Clara wore a simple ivory dress with a modest train. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of pink peonies. Chosen by Lily, Harold walked her down the aisle. You know, he said quietly, his arm steady under hers, when I first saw you in that restaurant, surrounded by vultures and holding my granddaughter like she was your own, I knew. Knew what? That you were exactly what this family needed, what my son needed. He squeezed her arm. My wife, Margaret, God rest her soul, she would have loved you. She always said the best people are the ones who've known struggle. At the altar, Ethan waited in a charcoal suit, his eyes bright with tears he didn't bother to hide. Beside him, Lily stood in her favorite pink dress, holding a satin pillow with 2 golden rings, practically vibrating with excitement. Clara reached them. Ethan took her hands. I spent 3 years building walls, he said, his voice carrying to the assembled guests. Protecting myself. Protecting Lily. I thought that was strength. He paused. But real strength is letting someone in. Real strength is choosing to trust again, even when trust has hurt you before. You taught me that. Clara smiled through her tears. And you taught me that I was never broken. I was just waiting to be found. The minister pronounced them husband and wife. Lily cheered so loud that birds scattered from the trees, and everyone laughed. Epilogue. 2 years later, the Rebecca Mercer Center for Child Psychology opened on a bright spring morning in Brooklyn, 3 blocks from the apartment where Clara had once lived. Clara stood at the front entrance, cutting the ceremonial ribbon, surrounded by her family and 200 guests. Lily, now 9 years old and tall for her age, stood beside her, holding a sign she had painted herself in bright colors. Welcome. We help kids find their smiles again. Ethan stood behind them, one hand resting proudly on Clara's shoulder. Harold sat in the front row, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief and pretending it was allergies. And in the waiting area inside, visible through the glass doors, a young woman sat clutching the hand of her silent, frightened daughter, hoping that someone inside could work the same miracle she had read about in the newspapers. Clara saw them. She walked over, knelt down until she was eye level with the little girl. "Hi there," she said softly. "My name is Clara. I'm going to be working here. What's your name?" The girl didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Her mother's eyes filled with desperate tears. They said no one could help her. They said she would never speak again. Clara smiled gently. "They said the same thing about my daughter." She pointed through the window to Lily, who was currently telling Harold an elaborate story about a squirrel she had befriended in Central Park, complete with dramatic hand gestures. She never stops talking now. That evening, the family walked through Central Park as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The same park where Lily had almost been hurt. The same park where Ethan had first called Clara by the name that changed everything. Lily ran ahead, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk, her laughter echoing through the trees. Clara and Ethan walked behind, hand in hand, their steps perfectly matched. "Do you ever think about that night at the restaurant?" Clara asked. "Every single day." What do you think would have happened if Lily hadn't run in? Ethan considered the question seriously. "I think we would have had a very polite, very awkward dinner. I would have gone home, told my father it didn't work out, and never called you again. Lily would still be silent, and I would still be alone, convincing myself that alone was the same as safe." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "But she did run in. She saw something that night that I was too blind to see. Something real. Something true." "What?" "That you were meant to find us. That we were meant to find you. That some things in this world aren't coincidence. They're fate." From ahead, Lily's voice rang out bright and clear. "Mommy, Daddy, come quick. I caught a firefly. Come see." Clara laughed, the sound pure and joyful. She took her husband's hand, and together they ran toward their daughter, toward the light she held cupped in her small palms, toward the life they had built from the wreckage of their broken past. That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, her firefly safely released back into the garden, Clara stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the glittering city lights. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about something," Lily said. "That very first night we met." "What did she say?" "She said her mother told her in a dream that someone would come, someone with hair like sunshine, someone who would take care of you both and make you smile again." Ethan held her tighter. "Maybe Rebecca did send you." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe that love doesn't end when someone dies. I believe that the people we lose find ways to keep taking care of us, even from wherever they've gone." He paused. "And I believe that somehow, some way, Rebecca knew that you were exactly what we needed." Clara's eyes glistened in the city light. "They laughed at me that night. Called me a nanny, called me nobody, called me worse." "And what did Lily call you?" Clara smiled. "Mom?" "Exactly." Ethan wiped her tears with gentle thumbs. "And that's all you ever needed to be." Outside the window, the lights of Manhattan sparkled like earthbound stars. Inside, a family held each other close. And somewhere, perhaps, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes looked down and smiled, knowing that her daughter and her husband were finally, truly, home.